Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Pearl 2C, and I have an important message for you. Africa has been a contradiction for far too long. What we need is for this continent's wealth to transcend to her people. We have so many resources, yet very limited opportunities. We provide the world with raw materials, yet we import finished goods. We're giving away our jobs to other continents, and this has to stop. Before COVID-19, we thought we had a major problem with unemployment. But when the pandemic hit, we saw an increasing crisis in job losses. Africa lost more than 20 million jobs at the peak of the pandemic, to the extent where people preferred to be infected than to be hungry because of job losses. Africa needs at least 15 million new jobs every year for its young people, and Africa has spoken. Quality jobs over any other issue should be a priority for our governments. This is why the Jobs Now Africa Coalition is putting jobs back at the top of the agenda, and all partners are in because
when you look at our continent, you realize that the population, specifically for young people, is growing faster than the ability of the continent to create job opportunities for the young people.
On the world record, African countries, South Africa, Namibia, and Nigeria occupies the table when it comes to high unemployment rates.
To the point that half of young people between 15 and 34 are now without a job.
I remember sending out my CVs every single day for 19 whole months, and I did not get any feedback.
Go through a lot before getting a job in this country, even as graduates after spending years in school.
Should this trend continue? No. We have to achieve financial freedom for young people as we recover and build forward.
We need to stop the brain drain. We need to create jobs in Africa.
Decent jobs so they can be meaningful and productive with their lives.
We believe that better integrated efforts are necessary to shift gears on youth unemployment.
Because they're a way to increase economic growth of any society.
Alleviate poverty.
And to interact with other people and networking, and also to have a full mental satisfaction.
It was me as an individual to meet my personal needs.
What Africa Jobs Campaign seeks to do is to ensure that young people have access to meaningful opportunities, equality of opportunities in order to improve the quality of their lives so that they can contribute to the betterment of this glorious continent.
Well, good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us on this, the 31st of March 2022. My name is indeed Naledi Muleo, and I'm going to be your host as we have this very critical discussion. Today, we are launching the hashtag JobsNow campaign, and we're also going to be unveiling the People's Charter that essentially will help us start creating jobs on the African continent. Now, we have a very packed lineup for you, but I want to paint a bit of a picture because I think in that video led by Pearl 2C, we have really started to get a sense of the work that's needed to be done. But I am a young African myself. I am under the age of 35, and I know what it is to be unemployed on this continent. And I just want to take you back to what that actually feels like, perhaps if you have never been unemployed yourself. If you've never been unemployed, you don't know what it feels like to wake up every morning and not have a purpose, to wonder what it is that you can contribute or are able to contribute to the world, not just to the family that is surrounding you, that also has their hands out and desperate for opportunity to put food on the table and to feel like they are purposeful and needed in the world. Job security is not just about money in the pocket at the end of the month. People that are unemployed are desperate, and they feel that even their self-esteem is impacted. Now imagine when you have a young person who questions what they can contribute to the world. Imagine what that does to how they view themselves as they go out into the world. It's no wonder that as you look into some of the streets in our cities on the African continent, we are surrounded by young people who are not just frustrated, but they are also angry. And we've seen it in some of the uprisings, not just in some parts of the country, but really parts of the continent as well. So the work of creating jobs is something that has to be done urgently. This is not just about putting food on the table. It is a desperate time for the African continent, and this is really about rebuilding the continent so that we're able to move forward before this ticking time bomb that we are facing explodes in our very own faces. So just to drive that message a little bit to home as we get into the discussion, we've got, of course, Kola Masha, who's put together an animated video just to really give us a sense of how deep the picture is. Let's take a look at this quickly.
My friends, we have a problem in Africa. That problem is rising insecurity. Since 1997, researchers at the University of Sussex have monitored global trends in armed conflict. Their research clearly shows that the number of armed conflicts in Africa have grown 7-fold in 10 short years, from 2006 to 2017. Let's think about that. 7-fold in a single decade. Why is this? We believe as oxygen is to fire, so are unemployed youth to insecurity. And there are a lot of unemployed youth on this continent. Unemployed youth like Sandra, who on a Saturday morning in March 2014 woke up excited at the prospects of getting a coveted job at the Nigerian Immigration Services. She kissed her daughter goodbye and left home, never to return. Sandra and around 15 other young Nigerians died that day, applying for a job. In the ensuing stampede that drew tens of thousands of people for just 5,000 open positions. In Nigeria alone, conservatively, a wave of 20 million youth entering an oversaturated labor force in 20 years from 1991 to 2010 caused youth unemployment to skyrocket, triggering not one, not two, but 3 insurgencies. Today, with a median age of 18, half of Nigeria's population, more than 80 million people, approximately the population of Germany, the world's 4th largest economy, are under the age of 18 and will be entering the workforce in the next 20 years, from 2010 to 2030. My friends, if a wave of 20 million youth triggered Niger Delta militancy and Boko Haram, I ask you, what will 4 times that number do? People who often hear these statistics say, wow, this is a ticking time bomb. I think not. The bomb has already exploded.
Let's take a moment to take that in, because 80 million young people wanting to enter the job force in the next 20 years, and we've already seen the high levels of violence that are already facing us. What is this continent going to look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now? We have to act, and the solutions have to come not just from a country acting on its own on the continent, but there also has to be a coordinated effort, so that we don't have some pockets where young people are running away into other countries desperate for opportunity. I am, however, an eternal optimist, and I know that initiatives do exist that really want to bring change to the continent. And those initiatives are going to be happening from a Pan-African point of view. But this particular initiative and the launch of the Jobs Now campaign is one that is already reaching 5 other African countries. And of course, 40 civil society organizations that are working particularly with creating employment. The theme for today is dismantling barriers to creating jobs, and not just any jobs. We're talking about quality jobs. We're facing a situation where young people are even discouraged to go and study into tertiary education because they see those that are skilled underemployed. So let's start looking at the solutions, because that is what we need at this stage. So just to start things off, I'd like to introduce the the executive director rather for One Africa, Mr. Edwin Ekweria. He's leading One's advocacy work across the continent. Mr. Ekweria, always a pleasure having you with us. And please give us some of the solutions, because we've got a lot of work to do.
Thank you for having me, Naledi, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I think it is important for us to set some context. So today we are launching a charter what we call the People's Charter for Jobs in Africa. And the main reason why we are having this conversation today is that we had some interactions and consultations with several civil society organizations across seven countries in Africa. And we basically asked the question, how do we deal with this issue? What should we put on the agenda of this of government, of the private sector, to create jobs on the African continent? Just for context, between now and 2030, like you've heard, over 120 million African youth will enter the workforce. And for us to be able to harness the potential that these young people bring, we have to create opportunities for them. Otherwise, it is disaster in the making. In fact, like you already heard in the video, sometimes it is not even in the future, it's already happening with us. Right now in Nigeria, the level of insecurity has taken another dimension. In the past week alone, 3 different attacks, all driven by young people. And in fact, when COVID-19 came, what we thought was already a very difficult situation has actually have shown that it is really getting worse, because more people are losing their jobs as the countries are trying to recover from the economic fallout of the pandemic. Now, despite African leaders' effort to work together to tackle this challenge through a renewed commitment from what we call the 2004 Ouagadougou Declaration and Plan of Action for Employment, Poverty Eradication, and Inclusive Development, in 2014 they came together to renew that plan of action. And again, even subsequently, in 2019, in Abidjan, they came together to still kind of reenact that plan of action. But even as we see all of this, different structural constraints have continued to put this agenda at the back of all agendas, because there are different things that African governments are contending with. So what we are thinking today is that as we think about how do we implement this plan of action, what we call the Ouagadougou plan, how do we bring this agenda to the forefront of this policy discourse, we thought about, can we put together some sets of proposals based on what we've observed in our countries to make sure that whatever the conversations are, the solutions are right in front of us. And that's why we came together and put this charter that we'll be unveiling today. Our approach is very simple. We want the government to enable the private sector to grow in labor-intensive sectors. Otherwise, we continue to, if we focus on high skilled jobs, we might be losing out a large number of Africa's young people. There's an assumption that increasing investment in jobs growth sectors will depend on dismantling what we call the structural barriers on the continent, especially in terms of how the African governments cooperate together. But their cooperation should be driven by the needs of the citizens and not by political agenda. So with these 40 partners that we're starting this coalition with, and about 70 youth networks, think tanks, business and industry experts across 7 African countries, we came together and discussed the unemployment issues and came to this charter that we'll be unveiling today. So basically, what are the key things we're asking for? We just want African government to prioritize creating decent jobs, especially with a policy to focus on jobs-rich sectors like agriculture, trade, manufacturing, ICT, mining and tourism, creative industry. We're asking that we should optimize right now the African continental free trade area, so that all of the processes at the national level that needs to be harmonized to make sure the CFTA works are actually in place. We also want to ensure that safe and dignified employment is the biggest agenda for any government, especially because of the high level of informal employment that we have on the continent, more than 80% for that matter. And ultimately, it's about how do we make sure the process is transparent, the process is open, and there's accountability. And how do we listen to the young people themselves who are mostly affected, because they have the solutions, they are innovative, they are energetic, they are restless. And together, if we bring them in the room, we can create solutions that will ensure that every intervention to create jobs is really accountable and is delivering on those options. That is what this is about today. And I thank you so much, because as we unveil, we're inviting all of you to join us to make this a reality. Thank you again. Back to you, Naledi.
Thank you so much, Edwin, and I really, really appreciate it. And it really is quite inspiring that there are the opportunities for us to start fixing things. And of course, so many questions around what it is that we can hear as guidance. I mean, the opportunities are there. There's the push and pull of whether or not we create green jobs, and how do we create green jobs when we struggle to create jobs where we are right now. That there was Mr. Edwin Ikweria, the Executive Director of One Africa, leading this campaign from a Pan-African point of view. And I can't wait to hear some of the ideas on how we start to bring it back home in the various countries that we are as the African continent. I am going to ask that we bring up now our Goodwill message from the Chief Executive Officer of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, Mr. Ifeyinwa Oguchukwu.
We at the Tony Elumelu Foundation would like to congratulate One Campaign at the launch of the Job Creation in Africa campaign. We know firsthand what great effort it takes to put together a laudable initiative such as this. So well done. We also know firsthand the cataclysmic impact that job creation has on Africa's current economic growth trajectory. Since 2015, we have been funding, training, and mentoring thousands of Africans across all 54 African countries. And we are thrilled to be partnering with One Campaign in ensuring the massive scaling of the Job Creation in Africa campaign.
Well, thank you so much to our speaker there. That there is, of course, the Chief Executive Director of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, Ifeyinwa Oguchukwu. I'm a South African. I'm loving all the different pronunciations of the names that we have as an African continent. We celebrate ourselves, but also try and find solutions to the very big problems that we're facing. So just before we went into that piece, I talked a little bit about the push and pull between needing to create green jobs. Now, I want to make an example of what we're doing back here in South Africa. We have development that is taking place where we have international companies wanting to mine in some parts of the country, parts that are considered to be sensitive biodiverse areas. And you have a push and pull that's happening at a macroeconomic discussion, macroeconomic level in the country about whether or not we create jobs and hurt the environment, or if there are opportunities, in fact, in the green space for us to create jobs. Now, the difficulty is for someone who's young and unemployed, I don't think they're worried too much about what's green and what isn't. Although I'd like to hope that they are, because we have a young generation that matters, that cares about doing things right. But if those opportunities do exist where we can save the biodiversity of our continent and still be able to create jobs for young people, surely those are options that we need to be exploring. So I'm going to bring up our next speaker. Our next speaker is, of course, Mr. Jean-Paul Adam, who's going to be speaking to us about opening opportunities for green jobs in Africa, what Africa must do at this very point. And of course, he's the Director of Technology, Climate Change, and Natural Resource Management for the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to say a few words on the occasion of the launch of the African People's Charter on Jobs and on the campaign for jobs in Africa now. So why do we need a People's Charter on Jobs? Because the job that someone holds or wish they could hold defines so many parameters of our society. Your job may determine where you live, who you socialize with, where your children go to school, and what are your prospects for the future. We can't shape a sustainable future without shaping the jobs that we are creating. Jobs bring value, of course, economic value and social value. But most of all, they bring value to the individual as well as to the collective. In Africa, over the last 10 years, only 37 million wage-paying jobs were created. In the same period, over 110 million young people entered the job market. Structurally, African economies are not delivering the jobs that are needed to address this demographic trend. While a commodity export and extractive industries growth spurt at the beginning of this century had reduced poverty in Africa from 54% to 41% of the population, inequality has risen during those same 22 years, with the absolute number of poor people increasing by 126 million. COVID-19 has further driven this divide, with a further 47 million people entering into extreme poverty. However, there are reasons for optimism. The principles of an African Jobs Charter are premised on the transformation of Africa's development model, a transformation which is possible and realistic. Allow me to highlight 3 priorities for this transformation. Firstly, delivering a green recovery for Africa can accelerate the type of decent job creation we are looking for. This means building more sustainable value chains, connecting Africa's rich mineral resources to the capacity to deliver sustainable, renewable energy technology to address our energy infrastructure gap, as but one example. Recent Economic Commission for Africa studies have shown that 250% more jobs are possible and are likely to be created in Africa through green industry value chains, such as through renewables, as opposed to fossil fuels. Secondly, delivering equality is also at the heart of this green recovery. By ensuring economic opportunity is accessible to all, no matter sex, age, sexual orientation, or political beliefs, is one of the fastest ways to ensure the economy grows in a more inclusive fashion. This also means giving specific attention to education, capacity building, and strengthening of skills acquisition relevant to the evolution of the modern economy. We should note that by 2030, 90% of all jobs will require at least some digital skills. Thirdly, investing in a new era of job creation and in young entrepreneurs is essential to transform economies and build a new sustainable jobs cycle. This means unlocking new financing for investment in infrastructure on the continent, improving energy access, ensuring digital connectivity, and investing in the infrastructure for the free flow of trade. Providing support, investment, and financing for startups and young entrepreneurs needs to be prioritized. It means upscaling climate-resilient investment in line with the Paris Agreement and the Glasgow Pact. This needs to be led by governments and supported by the private sector, and must have the dignity of the individual at its center. In conclusion, we may all face moments where we are frustrated with our jobs, but we all aspire to bring value to the world. This Jobs Charter is both an aspiration and a commitment to deliver value for ourselves and for others, in the true spirit of Ubuntu, whereby we can only complete ourselves by recognizing the value of others. Thank you very much once again for giving me the chance to contribute.
Il est très important de combattre le chômage pour que les jeunes Africains puissent entrer dans la vie active et ne soient pas tentés par les aventures vers les pays où ils traversent la mer et mourir dans la Méditerranée.
Parce que nous sommes l'avenir de demain, parce que nous devons contribuer au développement économique de l'Afrique, parce que nous sommes la base, le socle de notre cher continent africain, nous méritons tous un emploi décent.
Ça permet à chaque nation, à ce continent grand qu'est l'Afrique, de pouvoir se mouvoir autrement. La force du continent, c'est cette jeunesse.
Le chômage des jeunes n'est pas une exception africaine, mais il constitue une urgence pour l'Afrique à environ 1,3 milliard d'habitants, dont la moitié au moins de 25 ans.
36 des 40 pays les plus jeunes au monde se trouvent en Afrique. Les jeunes représentent 37% de la population en âge de travailler, mais font paradoxalement 60% des chômeurs. Donc, il est urgent pour nous de faciliter l'esprit d'entreprise, l'accès au financement et de miser surtout l'innovation et les technologies afin de permettre aux jeunes d'avoir surtout accès à un emploi décent en Afrique.
Pour contribuer à l'amélioration des conditions de vie des jeunes, en faisant des plaidoyers auprès de nos partenaires étatiques et non étatiques pour la création de l'emploi.
Nous engageons vivement derrière WAN pour réussir ensemble des stratégies d'emploi adaptées aux préoccupations des jeunes afin que les États puissent réussir à régler définitivement cette question d'emploi pour que les jeunes puissent s'épanouir au sein des différentes communautés en Afrique.
Yeah, I love when we're able to just remember as a continent that at times we feel so separate from each other, don't we? You've got the Francophone countries and then the English-speaking countries, and quite often we feel like we're two different people on the same continent, and it's important to remember that we are not. And in fact, that takes me back to a thought of traveling to Tanzania a few years ago and needing to go and connect in Doha, for goodness sake, just to come to Tanzania. And that speaks to one of the very big challenges that we have as a continent, the unseen barriers that we have to reach each other, to create opportunities and to grow each other's economies so that those jobs can be created. So a lot of these things are policy driven, and those are really the gates that need to be unlocked. And then there was the announcement that Africa finally has the Africa Free Trade Agreement. And I think that as a continent, we celebrated when we heard that finally we have, as a continent, agreed to work together in business and otherwise, because that's how we get things done. Intra-African trade has been far too low for far too long, and finally we're moving in the right direction. But how do we then take the Africa Free Trade Agreement forward, right? What are the steps we need to take to make sure that it's not just an agreement on a piece of paper that we laud with policymakers and media, but we actually see it in action? And that's going to be our next part of our discussion this afternoon. I would like to bring up, of course, Dr. Halima Noor Abdi to talk to us about dismantling barriers to make that agreement work. Of course, Dr. Halima Noor Abdi is the Senior Trade Advisor at the African Union, advising on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Dr. Noor Abdi, thank you so much for giving us your time. Looking forward to what you have to contribute to the discussion.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you all for inviting the FCFTA Secretariat. We really appreciate it. I bring you greetings from Accra. We are happy to be part of this conversation for a number of reasons. And basically, as it's been introduced, I'll talk about dismantling barriers. So background, which has been mentioned by others. Africa has the largest youth population in the world, and it says jobs now. I think jobs should have come a decade ago or even 2 decades ago. But it's good we are talking about it. It's good we have this charter being launched, and it's a crisis actually not to have graduates getting jobs. And Madam Moderator, you spoke about that. It's painful that people go to school expecting better life and ending up disappointed. So we have actually 540.8 million between 0 and 14 years. So it's good we are planning this now. Africans are not known for good planning. And you have 454.5 million between 15 years and 34 years. So these numbers actually come from ILO, and action is needed now to support Africa's greatest asset. We know what happened with the Arab Spring, etc. It was because of actually frustration with unemployment. So what do these numbers tell us? They tell us that young people are the future of the continent and have the potential to have a much more significant impact than they do now on the continent's development. So Africa is not harnessing its competitive advantage. When the youth are not, these numbers are showing that we need to bring them on board. In other words, the development of the continent is founded on transforming Africa's youth bulge into a demographic dividend. What are the AU aspirations? The fact that the youth are the future, we have this African Union's Agenda 2063, and FCFTA is one of the flagship projects of Agenda 2063, and aspirations 1 and 6 seek to achieve a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth. Inclusive growth is the key word, and sustainable development, whose development is people-driven, relying on on the potential of Africa's people, especially women and youth. The preamble of the African Youth Charter is founded on the conviction that Africa's greatest resource is its youthful population, and that through their active and full participation, Africa can surmount the difficulties that lie ahead. Moreover, sustainable development, SDGs, and I think the UN is better placed to talk about this, equally underscore the key role of youth in ensuring their impactful contribution to the achievements of SDGs. The challenges, I will recap before going to the solutions that you asked, what are we doing? Africa youth face challenges such as inequalities in income, wealth and power, unemployment and underemployment, limited access to education for the poor, actually health, information, and factors of production, and various forms of discrimination. Actually, I think it's a cultural thing that Africans don't retire. So you will find a 80-year-old still hanging onto a job. We need to be like Europeans. They want to retire at 60 and go live in Thailand or elsewhere. So basically, we need to do that. It's said that 1 in 5 of all young Africans have neither a job nor are they participating in education or training. So this is compounded by informal character of existing jobs. So basically, when I see like driving from work to home and you see all these young people selling things on the streets, it's quite heartbreaking. Actually, you realize it because they have no other option that they do these informal jobs. Please, when you're passing, even if you don't need anything, buy from these people to help them survive. Actually, it's survival. It's not even living. So empowering the youth through the FCFTA. Youth can be empowered through trade. Actually, people can be lifted out of poverty, as has been shown by Asian countries through trade. The FCFTA is anchored on creating an inclusive trade environment in which all traders, including women and youth, benefit in a manner that not only improves their competitiveness, but also their standards of life. When you have money in your pocket, you take your children to school, you have better healthcare. So this is actually good for all, and not only women and youth. The objectives of the FCFTA is to promote and attain sustainable and inclusive socioeconomic development, gender equality, and structured transformation. The key word also is structural transformation, which I had a previous speaker talking about the barriers, etc. So we need to transform our economies. And for example, the FCFTA protocol on trading services seeks to harness the capacities of the African service suppliers, in particular at the micro, small, and medium levels, to engage in regional and global value chains. In this regard, FCFTA state parties undertake to mobilize resources and implement measures with a view to improve the export capacity of both formal and informal service suppliers, with particular attention, as mentioned, to MSMEs, women and youth service suppliers. So as you said, this is actually an agreement, but it is action implementation that will make a difference. So we need to come up with action plans, and the youth in this space need to actually come up with action plans, how they think they could benefit from the FCFTA. So continuing with the economic empowerment through trade, trade is at the center of Africa's economic priorities, and hence the spillover of a fully functional integrated market. A trader, the other day I was in a meeting, a young lady from South Africa was talking about selling her products in Nigeria, etc. What is needed? So it is actually different segments. So you have the youth who are marginalized. There are those who are trading. There are those who are in school. All different actions. It's not a homogeneous group. We need to look at this economic empowerment through trade, how to do it, but differently, not to one size fits all, doesn't work. So improving market access for youth-led firms will foster not only an increase in the customer base, hence an increase in income, but foster diversification of products and services. And also we need to integrate them in value chains. Youth economic empowerment promotes entrepreneurship. So we really need to talk about entrepreneurship. People of my generation, older, younger, we've always thought of when we leave school, we need to look for jobs. But we have to promote entrepreneurship like other cultures, that in school, there are different actually skills development. How do you integrate the young into value chains, education and training? And we need now to have universities, industry, governments working together actually in the new IT-led, for example, jobs. So youth-led firms can be engines to create more and better jobs and can create diversified goods. What have we learned? We have learned that the low level of participation of youth in formal intra-Africa trade is an indication of Africa's youth marginal utilization of trade agreements on the continent. We have actually a number of recs. We've had a number of agreements. We have agreements with people outside of countries outside of Africa, but knowledge about this, this may be due to limited information and capacity and expertise required. So you might be a lawyer, but we need trade lawyers. We need people to go into arbitration, learn about opportunities offered by trade agreements in the continent. What needs to be done? So formally include youth. Sorry, we're out of time?
Yes, we are almost out of time, but I'll let you wrap up quickly, Doctor.
Okay, could I just talk about what we are doing at the Secretariat?
Could you do so very
Just
briefly,
a minute?
Doctor?
Is that possible?
Yes,
to
that's
talk
fine.
about the
That's
protocol
okay,
we
yes.
are developing for
Just
youth?
a minute, Doctor.
Just a minute. Okay, so the Assembly of Heads of State session held in December, they have agreed that we develop a protocol on women and youth. So this is actually highest political commitment. We are working on this protocol at the moment. We expect that now the ball is in the youth court to work with us, engage with the governments to be part of this process. So basically at the Secretariat, we are in the process of developing a protocol on women and youth in FCFTA. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Doctor. We really, really appreciate it. And I think the standout for me is needing to focus on entrepreneurship and particularly looking at how young people really are entrepreneurial. That's why we have 9 million young Africans every year going into the informal sector. They want to find the answers for themselves. So that is absolutely exciting. We don't do this alone. We have partners across the continent. Take a look at this. This is a team that we have put together. Take a look.
There's no better time to call for this campaign, the Jobs Now in Africa campaign. We need to stop the brain drain. We need to create jobs in Africa.
There was a time when skills for youth was the real problem. Now, the real problem is actually not skills, but jobs for youth.
This campaign aims to be a voice which enables the Black child to be economically active so that they could gain a sense of meaning, a sense of belonging, and dignity.
All right, well, let's get to some of our keynote moments for our discussion today. I really hope that on social media, this will be a discussion that takes off as well. Use the hashtag JobsNowAfrica. Let's talk a little bit about how we resolve the challenges of addition or value addition to creating jobs on the African continent. I'm going to bring up, of course, this is now representing Dr. Hanan Morsi, who is the Deputy Executive Director and Chief Economist for the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, or the UNECA. But from the UNECA, we are now joined by Mr. Jean-Luc Namegabe Mastaki, who is Director of the Sub-Regional Office for Central Africa. Sir, a good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time, and we look forward to your speak. I think your mic is off. The new age. Can you find a little microphone?
The new age. Thank you very much,
we
Madam Moderator. It's really a great pleasure to be with you during this great event. And I wish to thank the One Campaign and partners, including the 40 youth-led civil society organization in Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, DRC, and Senegal for inviting ECA to this launch of the Jobs New Africa campaign. On behalf of my boss, I will be discussing the importance of taking action towards the employment of young person, touching on some practices of emulation for promoting youth and highlighting areas of intervention for addressing youth economic empowerment in Africa. I'll start by making a situational analysis of employment in Africa. It's well known that although the continent is close to the world average, with about 60% of the African population employed, most of our jobs remain vulnerable, with low pay and in the informal economy. It has been stated by your predecessors here. In countries like Ethiopia, Mozambique, Tanzania, and Nigeria, vulnerable employment is, as a proportion of official employment, is estimated to be more than 80%, and it stands at more than 50% in many other African countries, except for some middle-income countries, which include South Africa, Tunisia, Egypt, Namibia, and Botswana. Why should we create jobs in Africa? These thinking figures speak volumes of the necessity to create quality jobs in our region. Overall, and improve existing jobs, which are more likely to provide broadly distributed benefit to individual, society, and the economy as a whole. Indeed, when workers are well paid, higher wages, they then spend on housing, goods, and services. These wages cycle cascades through the economy in the form of increased tax revenues from sales, property, and personal income. Youth employment is indeed a vehicle toward achieving SDGs. Tackling youth employment is widely recognized as critical to finding solutions to broader issues related to sustainable development, such as gender disparities, poverty reduction, economic growth, even stability, and world peace. Likewise, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in its Goal 8 calls to promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Specific targets incorporated in this goal include achieving full employment for young people and substantially reducing the proportion of youth not in employment, education, or training. Agenda 2063 of the African Union also advocates for youth employment in Africa. At the regional level, this agenda commits the African Union to speed up actions to support young people through strategies that combat youth unemployment and underemployment. Moreover, in its Ouagadougou Declaration, the African Union sets another regional framework for AU member states to promote employment, emphasizing the focus on youth and women. Although gender gaps are in some sub-regions are better than the world average, Africa as a whole continues to display wide gender disparities in selected sub-regions, with close to 80% of women employed in the informal sector, relative to 68% of men. Africa's youth still characterized by widespread poverty and unemployment. Yet Africa will continue to account for a significant fraction of the global youth population. It's projected that the continent's share of the world youth population will grow from 1/5, as it was in 2012, to a high as 1/3 by year 2050. However, the prevalence of extreme poverty, 37%, contrasts to 35% worldwide, and the high inequalities across generations also show that even when young people are employed, they are mainly employed in the informal sector. Almost 95% of our young people are working in the informal sector. It's noteworthy that between 2018 and 2020, 60% of the population were under age of 25. Individuals between the age of 15 and 24 comprise 20% of the population. However, only 3 million of jobs were created for the 10 to 12 million of young people entering the job market. In South Africa, for example, the country of the moderator, unemployment jumped from 28.7% in 2020 to 35% in 2021. As Southern Africa continue to grapple with the highest youth unemployment rate, over 50% of relevant labor force on the continent and globally, 96% of young people work in the informal sector in the rest of Africa. The continent will miss out on its potential demographic dividend unless it seizes the opportunities stemming from its young population through proactive policies that can tackle value addition for employment and policies that can generate strong youth employment. We need to turn the challenges into opportunities. To address the challenge and turn the demographic burden into demographic dividend, it's important to invest and grow sectors that interest the youth. This is mainly the technology sector. It would be important to encourage and fund entrepreneurship, as it has been said by other colleagues before me. Set up tech hubs and train entrepreneurs and job seekers in the field of e-commerce, pharmaceutics, digital finance, and encourage region-wide collaboration. We need to practice value addition worthy of emulation for promoting youth employment in Africa. In the context of climate change, industries without smokestacks can contribute to the dual constraint of creating jobs while reducing carbon emission. We are at the center of green economy here and blue economy there. They have characteristics similar to manufacturing, employing low and moderately skilled labor, having higher than average value added per worker, and exhibiting capacity for technological change and productivity growth. Industries including tourism, agro-industry, horticulture, transport, and information technology enabled service are generating opportunity for job creation and accelerating structural transformation in Africa. This can be benefit. This can strongly benefit to youth employment. The success of sugar production in Southern Africa, characterized by public-private partnership in its production chain, could provide some useful good lessons in this regard. Several initiatives implemented on the continent to bolster job creation have indeed worked in specific contexts. They provide suggestions for further policy design and implementation in Africa. We need to learn from each other. These include fiscal incentives to encourage work experience for job-seeking youth in the private sector, which yield some positive outcomes in South Africa and Cameroon, where I'm talking from. Overarching themes present in many successful initiatives include access to finance and training for aspiring entrepreneurs, as well as youth employment and skills development for those aiming to become wage employees in the formal sector. Given the prevailing fiscal strain, leveraging public-private partnership can attract private sector resource and raise efficiency. There are great policy perspectives. There is need for an integrated and cohesive approach that includes intervention at the macroeconomic and microeconomic level, focusing on labor supply and demand, and on job quantity and quality at the same time. To attain sustainable long-term solutions to the employment challenges in Africa, it's important to adopt inclusive policies and focus on small and medium enterprises, which are still the backbone of employment. In Cameroon, where I am, they constitute 95% of the enterprises we find in the country. In partnership, the public and private sector may formulate and implement employment initiatives that have higher chances of success. Policy should be geared toward industry that have higher value added and potential for high employment creation. This is an opportunity to call for action. This goes without saying that employment should be placed at the head of macroeconomic policy and not just left as a derivative. Communities, knowing their local population of young men and women, need to take the responsibility for policies at local level. And a broad coalition between the private sector development partner in the states, including the civil society, should adopt cooperative strategies to provide meaningful jobs to the young people, the majority of our population. As I conclude these talking points, I would perhaps underline most importantly that we need to point out the voice of young people, men and women, and their inclusion in the development of policies and programs supporting their own employment. This is what will make our break over the 20th century, on the 20th century solution. The timeline of the launch of the Jobs Now Africa campaign and the goal of to mobilize 1 million youth voices to campaign for urgent reform at national and local level in 5 African countries cannot be overemphasized. My participation and ECA's participation in today's event is a token of the Commission's full support to your noble initiative embodied in the People's Charter on Jobs in Africa. We at ECA look forward to the important discussion and outcome of this process, and will support whatever recommendation and outcome of your action. I wish all of you success in discharging your responsibility, and do thank you for inviting us to be part of this very important event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Mr. Jean-Luc Damegave Mastaki, Director of ECA Sub-Regional Office for Central Africa. Thank you for making that commitment. As a young African, I can say thank you for making that commitment, because it's critical for particularly my generation. You talked about the unemployment numbers in my own country in South Africa. Those numbers came out just yesterday, those statistics. And at this point, we have 35.3% unemployment. That excludes those that have already quit looking for work. They've just simply given up. When you look at what those numbers look like from a young point of view, young people in South Africa, 65.5% of them are not working. That's more than 2/3 of young South Africans that are desperate to find work. And what we hear over and over again, and as we have discussions here about creating jobs, we're told, well, young people can't ask government for jobs. The jobs have to come from the private sector. Right? And we understand that the jobs have to come from private sector, and that they need the space to be able to create those jobs. So let's move on to our second keynote address, which will essentially address that very matter, right? Representing Mr. Solomon Adekbi-Kweno, the Vice President for Private Sector Infrastructure and Industrialization at the Africa Development Bank, we are now joined by Mr. Mike Salau, who is the AG Director for Infrastructure and Urban Development Department. Thank you so much for giving us your time. We look forward to your contribution.
Thank you very much, moderators, and good afternoon to you all, dear panelists. And also, let me start by thanking Juan for organizing this very important summit about job creation for youth. And I think previous speakers have actually spoken to this subject as very crucial for Africa when looking at the African population profile, which has the youngest population on earth, which is also meant to double in population, particularly on the urban area where we have the largest population of young people. An urban area is supposed to be an innovation hub. It's supposed to be a center for creating wealth, center for creating jobs, and therefore where the youth are expected to get the maximum out of the growth. So I'm pleased here to represent Vice President Kweno, who couldn't be here today. But nevertheless, I'm here to deliver a few observational remarks on behalf of the bank, just to tell you how important the issue of job creation and youth is to the African Development Bank. The bank has a 5 objective, what we call the high 5, which throughout the high 5 promotes youth unemployment and youth integration and inclusion in whether it's in the energy sector, whether it's in the Feed Africa, Integrate Africa, and Industrialize Africa, and of course, enhancing quality of life for Africans. So the private sector for us, we see it as an engine of growth. It's key to achieving African ambitious job creation agenda described under the UN Sustainable Development Goals and African Union 2063 development objectives. So according to the recent IMF and IFC report, private sector accounts for 90% of jobs, 70% of gross domestic product, and 70% of all investment in Africa. This is huge, but yet not exactly where we would like it to be. So medium to small, micro, small and medium enterprises are therefore the engine of job creation in Africa. Therefore, the bank ambition is to support the micro, small and medium enterprise development and growth through entrepreneurship, and also specific program that aim to give opportunity to young people, particularly to access finance. So that's what we do through our financial sector department, to have opportunity in the agro business, where we finance some agro industry projects led by young people. Also indirectly through some instrument of use as a private equity firms, where the bank will put a capital to help create a business opportunity for young people. So we expect this to be a very important sector going forward, because creating markets, helping countries meet the necessary condition to help them be competitive enough to attract both international, domestic, economic objective is actually very important. There was a mention recently, just before me, about the African continental free trade, and I think this cannot happen, without full integration of African young people. So this is very key as we aim to support, the young job creations and entrepreneurship in Africa. The African Development Bank has even gone further to create a specific instrument that addresses these kind of constraint. So one of them is what we call AFAWA, which is Africa Finance Affirmation Action for Women, which is an instrument supported by some donor countries and African countries to really create opportunity for African women in entrepreneurship. So what we do is to use AFAWA to unlock business opportunity by working with financial institutions across the continent and trying to provide guarantee and create enhancement to support women-led entrepreneurship. We also have youth entrepreneurship initiative, which is one of the flagship of the African Development Bank, now in operation for the last, I would say, 5 years or so, and aim really to support, opportunities for young people in agribusiness. And these are funds that are available at the bank that can be tapped into by African young people. And we also, as you know, promoting what we call, African Youth Investment Bank, which is a very important initiative for the bank, promoted by the president himself, to actually further create access to finance, unlock financial access to young people, entrepreneurship, to be able to have, because we believe that through access to financing, people can really unleash their creativity and then bring about innovation and create jobs which are sustainable, to also create further jobs for attractiveness of the sector. So the bank recently has adopted a new strategy for private sector development for 2021-2025 to support its commitment to promote private sector-led inclusive growth that helps create a meaningful number of jobs in regional member countries, particularly jobs for youth and women, by developing a robust financial program that supports our member countries' agenda. So we have three pillars in that strategy. One, improving the business climate. That has to do with the enable, framework that has to be in the countries for us to, have a conducive environment to allow young people to emerge, support government programs that support emergence of young and youth unemployment. Second, expanding access to socioeconomic infrastructure, healthcare, education, and then so forth. And also third, promoting enterprise development. I think this is a key one where we really put money, financial resources, and other initiatives at play to facilitate in private sector development. And as part of implementing this strategy, we will contribute to developing enterprises through both financing and non-financing activities. And this we'd like to do it together with you and other partners that are actually present on the ground and are actually promoting youth entrepreneurship. That's why we think that your job creation part is actually very important, because it's actually nail down some of the sectors by which we can actually try to do this. One of them you mentioned in your chapter here is infrastructure. I'm myself, as acting director for infrastructure and urban development of the African Development Bank. We do finance in billions a lot of infrastructure projects. Sorry, and we believe that that billions should help to create sorry, opportunity. Let me just get some water. I'll be back. Thank you for that. We believe that billions should stay on the continent by creating opportunity for young people. That means through service delivery. So the construction business, the contractors, the engineers, the technicians, have to be African young people who have to either create their own enterprises or act as a subcontractors for big international firms, so that we can tap into these billions of investment and create jobs, to do that. And to do this, we need to build capacity for young people, young engineers, and this is what we do. We need to partner with universities, center of excellences, and educational, the TVET, for instance, to create that massive capacity that's required, so that African youth can actually take a part of that big pie of infrastructure financing. Second, we also do this through what we call a maintenance program. African infrastructure needs to be maintained. So maintenance is normally a kind of a recurring activity led by government. So we will urge youth to create enterprises that can take on part of that business and be active in maintaining infrastructure that's built. It could be on renewable, solar panel and other things, and also on hard infrastructure like a road, bridges, airport, seaport, and so forth. So that's something that we want to see emerging of young people taking opportunity in that regard. And this can only be done through partnership by having a government at the center, bringing in center of excellences, the universities, and then train young people in those jobs that can actually, create jobs. And then the third element is also, through some PPPs, where we can actually, have some local content. Local content here, meaning that we demand in our infrastructure project that we have a local content whereby, international firms have to, work with the local one to form a consortium to actually bid for a PPP project. And the last one is labor-intensive infrastructure, which is also very important. And this is best delivered through the municipalities, in cities, and also in some small towns, where you can actually structure the project to be labor-intensive, so that can actually address the issue of youth labor. And I'm happy to see that under your charter here, that infrastructure is one of the sectors through which you want to do this. And going forward, I think there are a few opportunities that I just want to mention quickly. One is on a circular economy. I heard you be mentioning this about green jobs and so forth. I think this is very important. We see this very often in our cities. I live in Abidjan. So, in my neighborhood, I see these young people coming with their own bicycle that have a lot of structure behind it to collect, solid waste and so forth. And this is, a reality. You can call it informal jobs, but it's a reality. And then those reality is, how do we help them to actually, create a pool of young people that are actually, transiting from that informality to create something that can actually build, a company that can build enterprises specialized in this thing. So this is something I think we must not dismiss, whether we call it informal economy or not. It's an economy that is, that is in Africa, that actually, embraces African culture and so forth. So it's real. Through that, people are able to, send their kids to school. People are able to create life for themselves and then also take themselves out of poverty. So therefore, that must be supported. Of course, our wish is to transit from that into a formal one. Blue economy is also another one. Blue economy is a sector we often neglect, but it has a huge potential to create opportunity for jobs, particularly for young people. We see here on the coastal, region, where we see a very, area where you see people going and involved in blue economy, whether it's fishing, whether it's working, at the port, looking at the ecosystem and so forth. Blue economy is a huge untapped reservoir for young people to also tap into. Another one is also fashionomics, fashion industry. The bank, if you notice, for the last 5 years or so, we've been promoting what we call fashionomics. And that's actually looking at the entire ecosystem or value chain for producing, fashion. We start with the, cotton industry, garment, transformation, the designers, the whole fashion industry that's there, so that, we bring in a lot of women and a lot of men and create opportunity for young people. That's something that's estimated to be in billions of dollars on the African continent. And we must tap into this one and actually multiply that particular sector. So it's another, area where we believe that young people can also, be a part of the ecosystem and actually create value there. So let me conclude here by saying that young people, should not only be on the demand side in infrastructure, for instance. They also have to go to the supply side. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, we want women and young people to also be supplying infrastructure services. Just one example, the bank is supporting the ECOWAS Center for Renewable Energy to create a women-led enterprise in supplying the natural gas, to households in some pilot countries, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Senegal, I believe, and Mali. And that project is actually, taking it's a pilot project that we are doing to see how we can, help them to structure the investment, help them to go to market, and then also help them to, raise funding and set up this firm. So this is the supply side, job creation that we also want to focus on, so that, we create opportunity for young people out there. So there's a lot to be said here, but because of interest of time, I think I'll just have to say again, thank you very much. And we're looking forward to working with you, and other partners here to actually make this youth a job creation, entrepreneurship, a reality on the continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. No, we really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for going into the granular detail of the opportunities that are available. And that for us is hope that the resources and opportunities are there, and there is will to invest in our economies and to create opportunities for young people. We're not doing this alone. We've partnered, and it's one campaign. And of course, we're doing work in Tunisia, in Nigeria, in Senegal, in Kenya, in the DRC, in South Africa, and in Togo. Take a look at this from Tunisia.
الرقمنة معنا لا ديجيتاليزاسيون إلى نيميريزاسيون دي سيرفيس تخلي اليوم يعني وخاصة بعد جائحة كوفيد يعني العمل على لي سيرفيس فورني ا ديستانس اليوم ولا مطلوب برشا. دونك هنا نستثمروا في التكوين بخاصة الشباب
تاع النساء اللي عندهم مشاريع ولا اللي يخذوا تمويلات. احنا المهنة المستطوعة اللي هي بلاد موجودة في القارة الأفريقية اللي معناها بالحق عندنا une sorte de قطيعة مع tout le continent africain, ce qui est dommage. اللي احنا مع جيراننا المغاربة ماناش
معناها غير حاملي الشهادات، وهذايا
عمق معناها الشعب التونسي. الإشكالية متاع البطالة معناها في الريف معناها وقت نقولوا معناها الثروة الاقتصادية أساسا معناها القطاع الفلاحي، واللي نجم يمشي في دو سونس معناها في علاقة بوضعية المرأة الريفية وظروف اشتغالها، لأنه حتى الاشتغال متاعها معناها هش جدا، وكيف كيف معناها البطالة في علاقة بالأرياف التونسية.
Well, a quick message to Mr. Mike Salau, who spoke just before we played that video from Tunisia. Young people are watching across the continent. The One Campaign is watching. We certainly will be back to tap into some of those opportunities. So I want to bring up Africa's Pearl. I'd like to call her Africa's Pearl. She's absolutely gorgeous. She is an actress and a creative businesswoman and a constant inspiration to young people. Listen, young people have written songs about her because of how much of an inspiration she is. So it is an absolute pleasure having you with us, Pearl Tusi. Pearl Tusi, everyone knows that one. Thank you so much for giving us your time. I couldn't think of anyone better to help us launch this People's Charter, right? Because this is a commitment to saying we will create jobs for young people on the continent. Please take it away.
Thank you so much. I think I'm so proud. First of all, no one has made me blush with an intro in a while. So thank you so much, girl. I really appreciate that. And someone who's part of the industry, I just want to say there's 22% of us who are part of the youth of Africa, part of the youth of the whole continent. We make up 22% of that. So we really need to understand that in any industry, we shouldn't be lagging behind. And me representing the creative industry that is worth 900 billion worldwide, and Africa is barely got 1% of a stake of that entire pie. That's really problematic. But I have a special message as well to share about what we're unveiling today. As fellow Africans, we know that things have to change, or else in Africa, things are going to be in the same situation we're in right now for about another 50 years, and that has to really change. Action is needed from everyone to make change happen. Policies have been identified to improve our business environment. We have created a charter, a social contract proposed by the people of Africa. All the stakeholders in government, the private sector, and partners around the world must know that we mean business. Africa needs jobs to be created now, or the future will get worse for our continent. Our amazing, energetic, enterprising, and creative youth must find opportunities to fulfill their aspirations, or they will become the source of Africa's troubles. We need to make it happen. We must make it happen. The Jobs Now Coalition is proud to bring our actions together so that they cannot be ignored any longer. Our African youth must not and will not be ignored. So I am very proud to unveil the website that will aggregate all our actions. Here you go. Ladies and gentlemen, there it is. Go to JobsNowAfrica.org to sign up and take action right now, everybody. As you sign up, sign the page and share with everyone. We know with all the social media channels that everyone has and the amount of people we have on this site that you guys are going to do the right thing. Take pictures, hashtag JobsNowAfrica, and share with the coalition partners in your country as well. Host debates, hold press conferences, join street rallies, join conversations online, share news of entrepreneurs. Just do something and we will gather all of them here and amplify to the world and with policymakers as well. As we begin this journey, we will not stop until job creation is now the main agenda for policymakers. And I'm a very proud ambassador for this campaign. I will do my part and you should do your part as well. Thank you so much. Let's make it happen for ourselves.
Pearl, thank you so much for bringing the energy and for unveiling the charter for us. It's an absolute pleasure having you with us, and I can't wait to see how you continue this conversation over and over again as well on the continent. The 5 pillars of that charter: to create decent jobs, to see ease of doing business and infrastructure, to harness youth potential and secure jobs for future generations as well, to ensure safe and dignified employment, which is what we all want, and to also see openness and transparency and accountability. That's it. That's the Jobs Charter. Go and take a look at the People's Charter. We're going to be sharing it with as many people as we can across the continent because we need to make a commitment, but it also gives us a map on how we really start to change things on the continent. So we're going to move into a panel discussion now, and let's really just have an open-ended discussion about what needs to happen now. What are the actions that we need to be taking now that the commitment has been made? I'm going to be joined by Dr. Bar El-Hajj, who is the Chief Policy Economist for the Office of the Vice President at the Africa Development Bank, Mr. John Ulanga, who is Regional Director for East and Central Africa Trademark. Thank you so much for joining us, as well as Aya Chebi, a youth gender activist and NALAFEM convener. Thank you so much for making time. I want to start with you, Dr. Bar El-Hajj, and say, one of the things that we talk about as a continent is we need to bring direct investment into the continent so that we can create jobs. And it sounds like an easy thing to do, right? But investment means that we need to look attractive to investment. That hasn't been easy when we've seen violence and instability. How do we get attractive as a continent?
Yeah, no, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to join this campaign. This is an important goal for Africa, because if we do not create jobs for young people, we are creating the sources of the problems for the future of Africa. So this is very, very important. And Mike has already talked about what the African Development Bank is doing in various program initiatives to create jobs for young people, including women. So I will not come back to that, but I will just talk about what you address your question. How do we attract investment in Africa, right? How do we mitigate the risk that people see for investment in Africa? So first, I'll say there are two types of risk, right? You have perceived risk and real risk. The perceived risk are type of risk that people outside of the continent hold, and even within the continent, actually. People think, oh, things are bad. No, I cannot invest here because of what happens in the news. So for that to change, we need to change the narrative. That all of us, right, including civil society organizations and young people that you are, to change this narrative to say that Africa, actually, you can make good returns on your investment in the continent. Everything is not bad. If you hear a bombing, a terrorist bombing somewhere in a village in a given African country, that doesn't mean the whole continent is unsafe, right? So we need to contextualize, and the academics and all those, we need to really change this narrative of reducing the perceived risk, because actually this is leading to higher interest rate for African investment, right? So it's something that's important. The other type of risk is the real risk, right? They can be because of political problems, or they can be because of the regulatory environment, or they can be because of the sector financing and some other market failures, right? So for any type of the risk, in this case also, we need to look at what the best instrument we need to bring in, right? For political risk, as civil society organization, we need to hold our government accountable so that we really promote good governance. We can facilitate transfer of power without bloodshed or without problems, right? So all this will help also improve the narrative, right, on the perceived risk. Second, we need to push for reforms. And here, African governments have been making reforms for a number of years. In my view, the issue is not so much having good policies. Often we do. We have state-of-the-art policy and regulatory reforms that we do. The issue is in the implementation, right? So we need to make sure that if we say it's easy to create a business. Somebody needs to check, and if it's not the case, we need to alert the government. Actually, this is not being done, right? Because what is on paper and what is done in practice often is night and day, right? So we need to deal with those type of things. And the third thing is looking at using a lot of financial innovation and new tools so we can mitigate risk. For instance, we can use blended finance tools so we can reduce the risk of investment projects.
Right.
So
yeah, let me step in. Let me step in because you're talking about what we need to do from a structural point of view, and I can't argue that, not one bit, because there's a lot of work to be done there. This is an issue that impacts young people, and one of the great irritations I have is every now and then you hear people say, "No, but you must go out and get it," as if young Africans are not going out to get it every single day, and they are. So those structural reforms are needed, but we also need to start celebrating and tapping into the energy of young people. I see you nodding, and I know that this is your space of work, right? So what do you say to that narrative that young Africans need to get up and do it, as if we're not doing that already?
I know, exactly. I mean, thank you so much, Naledi. I'm first of all extremely excited today for the launch of the campaign finally, and the People Charter on Jobs in Africa. I have to jump off, unfortunately, so allow me to unpack a few messages, and among them what you exactly described, as if we haven't been doing it, as if we haven't been changing systems and doing revolutions across the continent for the last 10 years. But there are three, I think, important messages the Charter is trying to articulate or convey, and I hope people, when they read it, they can resonate with it and they can join this campaign. And the first one is we're talking of jobs with dignity. So we're talking of dignified employment to provide financial freedom. I think this has been our cry as young people since 2010, when we started the revolution in my country, Tunisia. Our placards, our chanting, our demands were and still are شغل, حرية, كرامة وطنية, jobs, freedom, dignity. This was our slogan. So I think our generation's mission is financial freedom. The more financially free a young person, a young woman is, the more we can make choices for ourselves. We can be, we can become, we can move from, like you said at the start, from hustling and surviving of 3 meals a day to thinking, innovating, leading. The second message I think we try to unpack in this charter is quite related to what Al-Haji actually said, but in my generation language, we need positive vibes. We want leaders with positive vibes. We want media with positive vibes. There is a political discourse and a psychological manipulation depicting Africa as a shithole, as a horrible place to be, that you need to run away from as soon as you're born. When we hear leaders say, we will not steal the country because there is nothing left to be stolen. Or when we hear leaders say, we are targeting young people because they smoke weed and they're suspect of terrorism and they're protesting in the street. What are you saying by that? That young people are a threat, are dangerous, are the problem, not the solution. And that have pushed the youth on this continent to the edge, to die in the Mediterranean, because it's not just jobs, it's about dignity. It's the political discourse, it's the narrative, the identity of desperation and stigma and marginalization, simply negative vibes. So we really have to give confidence to ourselves that it's possible here. We have, we have everything here. We don't have to cross oceans to dream. We are the richest place in the world. And we need to also respect our history. For Africans who build pyramids, who build and nourish other economies, who grew coffee for the world to enjoy, who created jazz and Afrobeat for the world to TikTok it, who contributed to maths and science and more. And the third message quickly from the charter is Ubuntu. We talk about open border and intra-trade, AFCFTA and ECA representative, but African countries only trade among themselves. We need Pan-Africanism with political will. And I hosted the regional consultation you watched in the video in Tunisia, and participants were reflecting and asking themselves, what is Pan-Africanism? Does that mean, what can my country benefit from you? Does that mean how can I protect my national interests and exploit yours? No, because that's exactly the colonial legacy. Being Pan-African should be about exchange, solidarity. I have dates and olive oil, you have wheat and cotton. We share our value for each other. We also talked in the consultation about this mismatch between education and job market. And until we fix that, what do we do about the unemployed millennials today? We exchange. We can host 10,000 young doctors to employ because your market needs it, and I can host 10,000 young technologists to employ. So all of this to say, we can create jobs for all young people on the continent. Solutions are possible and available, and Africa's integration can make that happen. What we need now is to really make this campaign and to make jobs an issue of national and continental agenda.
Right. Yeah. You know, Dr. El-Haj talked about the structural reforms that we need. There's the one building block, right? The energy that we need from young people. Well, Aya's just proved that we've got it. And we've got the positive energy for us to get there. Now, what Aya's talked about is how we start trading with each other, right? She's got the dates, I've got the oil. How do we work with each other? Now, Mr. John Ulanga, this is really your place of expertise, right? Where are the barriers? What needs to happen so that a young business person or a young entrepreneur can trade with another young entrepreneur on other parts of the continent without fear of it being an administrative headache?
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think this is a great opportunity to share our thoughts in terms of what we can do to create jobs in the continent. And yes, she just has talked about the opportunity for trade amongst African countries. And as you know, through the AFCFTA, Halima talked about the AFCFTA earlier, they have agreed on rules of origins where 88% of tariff lines you can trade freely without tariffs, which is a great milestone, but it's not enough. Of course, with the 88% of the tariff lines, it means member states now can freely trade amongst one another. But of course, the next step, you have to localize that continental agreement. It means every country will have to put them in the local legislation or national legislation for them to be gazetted so that they can be treated from customs level. As you know, it is the customs management function that allows goods to come in and go out. So that is an important step. And of course, once that happens, there are a couple of barriers that we need to talk about. And Mike, I think, also alluded to some of them. Number one, infrastructure. The infrastructure in the African continent does not really fully support trade amongst African countries. We have a lot of barriers in infrastructure. So the first investment we need to attract is to attract investment in addressing our infrastructure bottlenecks. And you might have heard, I think last week or the week before, European Union has actually announced a multi-billion funding opportunity for infrastructure in Africa along some specific trade corridors. So infrastructure is something that we need to look at, both hard infrastructure, road and rail, but also the soft infrastructure. We need to look at non-tariff barriers to trade. These are issues like harmonization of our standards. Goods produced in one country should be accepted in another country, African country, without having gone through very rigorous standards authorization processes. So harmonization of our standards needs to be looked at. Lengthy customs procedures, our custom processes and functions are not talking to one another. So I think there's also an opportunity to looking at our customs procedures, harmonize them, making sure that customs process of one country talks to custom processes of another country, address issues of weak value chains. We do not have regional value chains that take advantage of goods that are produced in different countries and to be able to be produced in one country in a more efficient way. So weak value chains, or we need to have stronger regional value chains that take advantage of the goods that are produced in various parts of that. So those are some of the things. Infrastructure, payment systems. It's very difficult to pay for goods or services in another African countries. It's easy actually to pay for something in outside the continent than actually to pay for something within the continent. So looking at the payment systems, making sure that we have electronic payment systems that are functional and efficient. Those are some of the examples that I think I can give are the barriers that we need to look at. And I am sure many of those can be addressed in the near future.
Yeah, I like that idea. Now let's talk a little bit about the kind of conversations that we need to be then having from country to country, and where those opportunities really lie, right? Perhaps Dr. Ba, I'll bring you in here, because it's one thing to talk about we need the infrastructure, and we can't disagree with that, right? We've had plans to have intra-African infrastructure that connects us for a very long time. We're getting there. The conversations is getting bigger and bigger. Where are the pockets of opportunity that you see, Dr. Ba? Where are the first places that we need to be looking at, even from a regional point of view?
So, sorry, I was having a hard time hearing your question.
So can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Should I ask it again?
Yes, go ahead a little bit. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so we talked about connecting African countries so that we can do business with each other. Where are the opportunities that you see that we need to be harnessing now? Where are the green shoots?
So the opportunities, I believe, is in implementing the AFCFTA. That is how we can create economies of scale, so we can start producing much more. Because the reality is that there are many African countries, they are very small, right? So if you create a factory in, let's say, my country, Guinea, that the market is small. But if you can sell to Senegal, you can sell to Cote d'Ivoire, suddenly you have a greater market. So making sure that the AFCFTA is not just on paper, but actually it's implemented, I believe that's the opportunity. Second opportunity is on green energy, or in the energy sector. Today we have a large deficit in energy, and we need to bridge this deficit before we can industrialize, for instance, right? So it's becoming more affordable to do renewable energy. So we need to work on that. And also it's an area where it's a big source of job creation, the energy sector. So I will just talk about these two areas where we can really create jobs now. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. I think before we wrap things up, if I go back to you, Mr. Ulanga, and I say to you, we've got digitization that's happening, right? And, everyone is getting plugged in. Look at how we're doing this. This is actually quite incredible. We're doing great work, and we're not even in the same country. How do we maximize on that? Young people are plugged in. And as you answer that question, are you optimistic?
I am very optimistic. If you look at the level of digitization, as I've said, in Africa, I think in terms of, let's take an example of mobile phone penetration. It's probably amongst the highest in the world, the rate of penetration of mobile phone. We might not get there yet, but in terms of the rate of penetration, but also the digital transformation in small pockets. I think what needs now to happen, and through AFCFTA, is to create African platforms that connect the various trading platforms in the continent. We need to have an Amazon, an African Amazon. We need to have an African Alibaba, which is a connection of the markets, the marketing system, connecting with a payment system, a very efficient payment system, but also a very efficient logistics system, such that when I buy something from an African country, then issues of customs, transportation, issues of standards, they all are resolved through that one digital platform, which I think is missing. And we have the capacity to produce that. Thank you.
Yeah. I think we have the capacity to produce it. I believe that we have the capacity to produce it. In working in news, I see every day just the levels of innovation that come from young Africans. You know, you look around the rundowns across the continent, you'll find young people that are building cars from scratch using scrap metal. The idea of creating that platform that you're talking about is not a difficult thing. This is what young Africans are able to do. We connect and we can create those platforms. And I think a year from now, those platforms will exist because we're having those conversations. And I appreciate the optimism. Thank you so much for speaking to us. That there, Mr. John Ulanga, Regional Director from East and Central Africa, Trademark, really helping us bridge the gap of how we start to trade with each other as Africans, what we need to do from a policy point of view, how to make it easier for young Africans to connect and work with each other without needing to pay a whole ton of money that comes out of their business. And then, of course, thank you so much to Dr. Bar El-Haj, Chief Policy Economist from the Office of the President of the African Development Bank, showing us there is opportunity, there's structural plans, there's resources. We're going to fix this. And we have a People's Charter as well that is a way to map us in doing so. We've got our 6 countries already that are involved in this initiative. And I hope that the African Development Bank as well will help us to have these conversations with other countries on the continent as well. Unfortunately, we have reached the end of this discussion, but I hope that it will continue even on social media because the work doesn't end. I'm going to ask for Ms. Desiree Azokbavi to come up and give us our vote of thanks. She, of course, is the Francophone Africa Director for, or Mr. Apologies for that, Mr. Desiree Azokbavi, Africa Director for Francophone at the One Campaign.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Chers participants, mesdames et messieurs, au nom de tous les partenaires de la coalition JobsNowAfrica, j'aimerais sincèrement vous remercier pour votre temps passé aujourd'hui avec nous dans le cadre du lancement de cette campagne au niveau panafricain. Nous sommes convaincus que vous resteriez avec nous tout le long de cette campagne pour vraiment pousser ceux qui en ont le pouvoir, ceux qui en ont la capacité de créer 15 millions d'emplois en Afrique chaque année. Nous n'avons pas le choix de toute façon. Nous avons le devoir de créer de l'espace pour la jeunesse, pour qu'elle participe pleinement au processus de développement de notre continent. Nous avons des ressources sur le continent pour le faire. Et nous, au sein de la coalition JobsNowAfrica, composée d'une 40aine d'organisations de tout le continent, nous ne nous tairons pas. Nous ne nous reposerons pas jusqu'à ce que l'Afrique soit capable de créer 15 millions d'emplois décents chaque année pour nos populations. Nous vous remercions encore une fois et nous comptons beaucoup sur vous tout le long de ce voyage. God bless you all. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you so much for your time. We really, really do appreciate it. And that brings us to the end of this discussion. But let's keep talking even on social media. Use the hashtag JobsNowAfrica. Whatever country you're in, let's go to our leaders, to our policymakers, to civil society, to young entrepreneurs, to venture capitalists, to whoever it is that is involved in creating opportunities for young Africans to go on and do the work, but also to contribute to the bigger discussion because we cannot work in silos. Thank you so much for joining us as we have launched the Jobs Now campaign and also the People's Charter calling for jobs for young Africans. Thank you so much to the leadership of the One Campaign. Continue the good work. Let's continue the conversation. Keep creating opportunities and have yourselves a blessed afternoon.